Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Michaela Meltzer, president of the Sisterhood at the Hashomayim, and welcome to our final event of the year. It's been another strange year, but hopefully next year we'll all be able to meet in person. And I can't think of a better guest than to close out our yearly program. And for many of you, you will recognize her voice or her face. Tarah Schwartz worked for CTV News as a news anchor and a journalist for over 18 years, won numerous journalism awards, and now she works as a director of communications for the MUHC Foundation, raising awareness about philanthropy. But she's not here tonight to talk about that. She's here tonight to talk about her new book, Can't Help Falling. It's about her road to motherhood, and you can purchase the book at Bibliophile on Queen Mary. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you do. It's a very powerful story. It's a story not just about challenges, but about determination, about strength, and about courage. So if you have any questions, please pop it in the chat. We'll get to them after Tarah has finished speaking. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Tarah, and welcome. And we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I didn't realize it was your last event of your season. So I'm very privileged to be in this spot. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's taking the time out of your evening to spend some time with us. I really appreciate it. I was really grateful and thrilled to receive the invite to be here tonight. Any opportunity to talk about this book is a treasure for me. So that's what I'm going to do. So I thought what I would do for the time that I'm going to be speaking is I would sort of take you on the journey with me, and then I would sort of read little snippets from the book as that journey happens. So you'll be able to hear a little bit about how I write it in the book. So as some of you might know, I was a journalist and news anchor for CTV for 18 years. And during that time, later on in my career, I wanted to become a mother. And I did wait a little bit longer than some people do. And I ended up having significant challenges in becoming a mom. It was a process that changed me profoundly, changed who I was, took me down some very, very dark roads. Some of them I wasn't quite exactly sure how I would survive them. But ultimately, I think that's what we all learn, that we are capable of surviving much more than we think we are. I lost my first pregnancy when I was almost 5 months pregnant, and that was when I was 38, and that was sort of a defining life moment for me. It was unexpected. It was quite late in the pregnancy, and it was a moment that I quite frankly feel defines a significant portion of my life. I can see a photograph and I can know absolutely instantly if that photograph was taken before or after I found out that that baby would never come to be. So it really was a life-changing moment. And during that time, it was, it was work as usual. I mean, we all have to pick ourselves up and manage to put on our best face forward into the world, especially when my face was looking out and a lot of people were looking back at mine. So it was a really difficult period. So I thought I would start off by reading a little bit from that chapter about that moment. Okay, so my husband, at this point, my husband and I have just found out that the baby will never come to term, and we have to figure out what to do now. So we were silent as we drove to Dr. Sampson's office, sitting before her, separated by a desk and a million miles. The disconnect between us as a couple and the rest of the world began. I could see Dr. Sampson's mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anything she said. She seemed so far away, her white lab coat getting dimmer with each sentence. I know this is terrible news, she said sympathetically. We said nothing. It's important that we make plans, she continued. Your pregnancy is already very far along. We need to act quickly. I stared beyond her at a cream-colored wall, my eyes fixed on its drabness with an intensity that I needed to keep me from disappearing completely. I forced myself to speak. Is there anything we can do? I'm sorry, she said. The hold I had on myself gave way again. Unable to accept what she was saying, I started heaving. There was no escape from her words. There was nowhere to hide from the truth because the truth was inside me. It was the most devastating moment of my life. I'll make the call, Dr. Sampson said, and then she left the room. I felt barely conscious in the following days, only a fragile shadow who managed to talk with family, sign papers, and lie in bed with the curtains closed. Part of me slipped away during those days, washed down a bottomless drain, never to be seen or heard from. My father held my hand as we chose an urn and made arrangements for the cremation. I saw his strong shoulders slump under a weight he could not carry or will away. Less than a week later, I lay in a hospital bed. A kind doctor let me stare at the ultrasound of our child for as long as I needed. I cried the entire time, willing this wretched moment to be a dream I could wake up from. I remember the doctor had white hair and limpid blue eyes, fatherly, even in his appearance. He touched my cheek, a gesture filled with immeasurable kindness, and he said he was going to sedate me. I lost consciousness, watching the room fade away. Then that gentle doctor took my son out of my body. The months afterward were airless and suffocating. Our lives became an old black and white movie, something colorless we watched rather than lived. Flashes of what might have been dropped before our eyes like birds falling from the branch of a tree. There are no words to convey the heartbreak. One can only describe the breaking. So that was sort of the process that we were living. And part of the reason that I wrote this book is because when I got back from South Korea after we had adopted our baby boy, I felt like I had so many things. I had all of that, all of those things still inside me, even though I had the joy and the love of bringing home a new baby. And I felt like if I couldn't get it out on paper, sorry, I have all this light, this sunshine, there we go. If I couldn't get it out on paper, I felt like it would sort of bubble up in me always. So I just kind of started writing. People ask me often, like, did you intend to write a book? I really didn't. I just kind of felt like I needed to get it all out. So I sort of just started, and it just sort of gushed out like a giant dam. And it took me it took me a year and a half. So a year and a half of gushing until I finally got the entire book out. So, and one of the reasons I wanted to write it is because it was a process that was very, very lonely. And I think anyone who has ever lived through miscarriages or infertility treatments can relate to that feeling of loneliness. Like anything, infertility is a stigma, and people don't know what to say or do. So they tend to do and say nothing, which means that it's a very, very lonely journey. And I wanted women and couples who are going through it to read the book and feel like, oh my God, I felt that way too. So I'm not crazy. And all of those emotions that they feel could be validated. That was really sort of why I wanted to write it. I wanted them to see themselves reflected, because I really didn't have anybody who was going through it. And it was really, really lonely. And it's something that I think we need to change. And I think the only way to change it is by talking about it, So I did go through multiple miscarriages. That was the first one, and several rounds of infertility treatments, which again succeeded in, I was able to become pregnant, but I was not able to carry to term. And then I had always wanted to adopt a baby and have a baby. So I decided maybe I should be, focusing all my efforts into adopting a child. So even while we were going through the fertility treatments, I put our names on all kinds of lists, anything that was open to Quebec at that time. And it changes, countries open and close, China, Korea, Vietnam, various European countries, Eastern European countries. And when I was deciding on my third round of IVF, the phone call came and said that we were next in line, and did we want to go through with adoption? And I always tell people, if you're even contemplating adoption, to put your name on every list, because that phone call did not come for more than 2 years. So I put our name on a list, and then 2.5 years later, we got that phone call. And one of the platitude, when people realize that you're having trouble, sometimes they throw out platitudes like you can always adopt. And that's sort of one that they give you. And they say that without understanding the immense challenges that's required of a person and a couple. It is really, really difficult. You go through a lot. It's very long. The waiting never stops. And sometimes things can go wrong. So even after our years of struggling with infertility, we got to the end of our adoption. We were weeks away from leaving on a plane. And then this happened. So I'm going to read a little bit from that chapter. Montreal's deliciously hot summer had come and gone. Autumn arrived just as the leaves had changed color, Turning trees into fields of blazing sunsets, the long promised phone call arrived. Enrico, that's my husband, Enrico was home. I know he would rather have been anywhere else. I also know that having to call and tell me what was said was one of the toughest moments of his life. I was at work covering a story in a town outside of Montreal. When I answered his call, Enrico's voice cracked like an old record recorded long ago. I heard him take a breath. I closed my eyes. We're not getting the baby, he said. The birth mother has changed her mind. When you've looked loss in the eyes once, you know what to expect when you see it again. It's like muscle memory. I was about to be thrown back into an unmistakable hell. A metal door inches thick slammed shut. I felt it close around me, thick and impenetrable as a bank vault that shoots up and locks into place when a panic switch is pulled. I could almost see the large wheel lock turning and securing in place. No, 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 please no. The pressure of what those words meant pounded against me, demanding to be acknowledged. I was breaking. There was nothing I could do to stop it. It felt as if my ribs cracked, snapping in two as easily as dried branches. I heard the cameraman asking me what was wrong, but my entire body was clenched like a muscle in spasm. And then the dam broke, ripping away my metal wall as if tossing aside a piece of tin. I started to weep. Our baby isn't coming. Our son belongs to someone else. I'm not going to be a mother, not this time. So yet more challenges on the way. And I think any type of struggle that you go through, you always have to make a decision about how you're going to manage the loss, how are you going to manage the struggle? And someone said something to me, a young woman that I met recently, and I've been going back and reading it every time I think about it. She said, the depth of our grief comes from the same power as the source of our love. And I thought that must be it. And I thought that was really beautiful because you have to dig so deep inside of yourself to figure out how you're going to manage loss and struggle. So we decided to pick ourselves back up and we forged ahead with yet another adoption, which worked out. But it was not easy. It wasn't just as simple as, okay, here's another child and everything's going to go fine. We ended up heading to South Korea. We did get a second proposal. We went to meet this beautiful baby boy. We had to stand before a judge who's going to meet you once and decide whether or not they're going to pronounce you this child's legal parents. It was very, very stressful. My husband headed back to Montreal, but I decided that I wasn't going to leave without our baby. So I ended up staying in Asia. And to this day, I cannot say how much that decision to stay in Asia fundamentally changed our lives, because we had significant problems. Even though we were legally pronounced the baby's parents, foreign embassy workers went on strike. And no adopted child will be allowed to leave a country or enter a country without what's called a landed immigrant visa. So as soon as they arrive in permanent resident visa. So as soon as they arrive in Canada, they become a permanent resident. They don't have to go through any process. And the foreign embassy workers went on strike and no visas were being issued at all for workers, for students, for adopted children. So everything kind of ground to a halt and nothing was happening. So I decided to right away take custody of our baby in Korea. They finally gave me permission to do that. And then when the visas started flowing in again, they received the visas for all the other adopted couples that had gone the same time as we did, but they were not issuing us a visa. They wrote to the Korea adoption agency and said that we were not getting a visa and they wouldn't tell us why. And it was terrifying because we had come all this way. We had gone through this entire lifetime of finally having this beautiful baby boy who was ours, but we couldn't take him home and we couldn't understand why. And nobody was helping us understand. It was very, very stressful. The entire Korean adoption agency was frantic over it because we were legally his parents, but we couldn't leave. We couldn't get him out of Korea. We couldn't get him into Canada. So in parts of the book, I really weave a lot of the stories that I covered as a journalist, all of them in some capacity touched on loss. So if you ever used to see the kind of stories I used to report on, I always loved to report on stories that were challenging. It was always something I loved to do. I loved to meet people where they were at their most vulnerable. And I felt it was a great privilege to be able to sort of tell their stories and hope that I managed to get their sentiments, right, that I was communicating, that I was a voice for them at that time. So woven throughout the book are multiple stories that I covered as a reporter. And when I was in Korea and we were unsure if we were going to be able to bring this baby home, I had a dream, and I remembered one of the stories that I had covered. And again, there's many of them woven through the book, but I wanted to read a little bit of that one. That. Thought I marked it, but it's called The Boy and the Rivière Noire. Oh, 144. Okay, here we go. The Boy and the Rivière Noire. My dreams became restless. I dreamt of loss and horror I had seen up close in a story that I had reported on and that I have never forgotten. It was 1 week before the holidays. In a remote Quebec town blanketed by a crystalline winter snow, the unimaginable happened. A 6-year-old boy whose family had long lived by the shores of the Rivière Noire walked too closely to its banks and slipped inside. The freezing water must have claimed him quickly, and the fast-moving current swept him away. His older brother, frantic, ran for help, ran for his father, begging him to undo what life had snatched from his grasp. His father, a large man, ran to the river, the laces of his boots undone, his coat unzipped, despite the cold, shouting, screaming, begging for the river to return his son to him. He searched the ice, transparent in places, for a coat visible under the water, for anything that would lead him to his child. He did not find a single trace. He dropped to his knees and with his face in his hands, sobbed. Within minutes, calls for help rushed out over lines like racehorses, and all available emergency personnel from nearby towns across eastern and southern Quebec arrived by the banks of the river. Firefighters used sharp metal picks to break through ice near the shore. Police officers scoured the woods, throwing aside thick brush weighed down by snow. Divers in yellow plastic suits with ropes tied around their waists inched forward, seeking a hand they could pull to the surface. Within 2 hours, the media arrived, reporters and satellite trucks, camera crews and writers. I stared out into the Rivière Noire and asked it to be forgiving. The media represented the eyes and ears of a province of 8 million people who seemed to collectively pray for the life of that little boy. The hours dragged on, the agonizing search clawed forward with nothing to show for all the time spent. Visibility shrank, and as the last tenuous rays of light faded, the search was called off. It was renamed to, it was no longer a search and rescue, but a search and recovery. They were now looking for a body. Reporters drove back to their stations, stories got written, words were spoken, but there were no answers and there was no solace. We told people that today there was no happy ending. We explained that at dawn, the search for this little boy, for his body, would begin again. We showed video of rescue divers and aired interviews of their greatest concern, that if he was not found soon, one freezing day would cause the sliced up ice over the river to reform, and his small body would stay frozen there until spring, a sky-colored tomb under the ice. That night, back from the banks of the river, Dolor clung to me like soot, and there was no washing it away. It ate next to me, watched me bathe, curled by my side in my bed. I lay awake that night and imagined the firefighters and rescue divers home with their families. They would have arrived too late to say goodnight, so they would have tiptoed into their children's bedrooms and stared at their sleeping faces and thought, there but for the grace of God. A tender kiss would be placed on the children's foreheads and a wish of sweet dreams. Then they would sit wearily at their kitchen tables, their heads in their hands, a bowl of steaming soup set before them. Eat, a lover or a partner would say, placing a hand on a shoulder. It will be a short night. Unable to sleep, I wondered if that boy's mother had found even 1 hour free of nightmares. I imagined her eyes swollen, curled in the bed of her other son, refusing to leave, unable to let him go, her arms wrapped around his chest, her face buried in his hair. I imagined his father awake, standing and staring out toward the gluttonous river, disbelief and anguish tearing at him, his very being shattered into too many pieces to ever pick up. So that's a little bit of that one. I really love the question and answer part of these kind of talks, so I'm going to wrap up really soon so that we can have a chat all together. So if there's things you'd like to know or chapters you'd like me to finish or anything, we can talk about it. So eventually we did get our beautiful baby home. It gets into the book, and started a life with our beautiful Samuel, who's recently turned 10. So it's hard to believe all this time has passed. I wrote the book, like I said, in a year and a half. I held on to it for a long time, unsure of what I really wanted to do with it, and then started to think that maybe there was women out there who wanted to read something like this, who wanted to feel like they could see themselves, as I mentioned. And I've received, I would say, oh gosh, 100 or 150 messages from women on social media who have emailed me just to reach out and sort of say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for writing this, because your voice is my voice. And every time I get one of those messages, they're so precious, and we exchange words and we talk, and I feel like, okay, like we're managing to crack open this conversation. And I even get messages from people who've read it who didn't go through it themselves, but have watched loved ones go through it. And I think that's one of the important things that one woman wrote to me, and she said, had I read this 6 years earlier when my sister was going through it, I would have said more and I would have done more. And I thought, yes, okay, because the only way that you can really help someone is by opening up the conversation, by saying, this must be very hard for you. Is there anything I can do? Just by asking that question and acknowledging someone's pain, you're opening the door to a compassionate and understanding relationship, rather than leaving that person to feel lonely and not knowing what to do, because I understand it's not easy. I remember when I was working at CTV, there was all these women who were, having babies at that time, and I was struggling, and, it's impossible to keep it a secret. Even though I tried, I was really struggling with embarrassment and shame, and feeling like I was less than because I couldn't do something as simple as get pregnant and have a child. And so they thought they were protecting me by leaving me off of these baby shower lists. And I understood that they didn't want to put me on the list because they would have felt bad inviting me to a baby shower when I couldn't have my own baby. But nobody ever came up to me and said, this must be really difficult. Would you like to come, or would you prefer we leave your name off? And is there anything we can do for you? They didn't know how, because we're not talking about it. So that's why I feel it's really, really important to talk about it, to give people the tools to understand that it's okay. It's okay to say, this must be tough. Are you okay? Do you need something? So in my last few minutes before we chat together, I thought I would just sort of read a little bit of the ending, not all of it, just because I would love you all to read it. And you can get this book anywhere. It's on Amazon, it's in Indigo, it's in bookstores everywhere. So you can get it anywhere you'd like. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of the ending-ish. Sam, that's my little boy, Sam helped me heal. Adoption is a labor of the soul. You take a great breath, then exhale minute by minute, day by day, year after year, until a tiny, precious being is placed in your hands, asking to be cherished. Our son has given us more than I can ever possibly put into words. When I feel him pressed against me, there is simply nowhere else in the world I would rather be. When I tuck him in at night and he places his palm on my cheek, I stare at him, refusing to blink, because I don't want to miss a single second. I love you, Mama, he says as he touches my face, not because I said it first or because I prompted him, but because he really and truly feels it. He hugs me and smiles that glorious smile of his, which takes up his entire face, and then he falls asleep. I can spend hours watching as his breathing slows and he relaxes into dreams. He's so angelic, so perfect. With all that Sam has lived in his short life, I am in awe of his strength. He inspires me to be better in every possible way. His life reminds me not to be afraid. I know that every step it has taken to get here, all those years of waiting, every heartbreak and disappointment, every piece of me that had been broken and put back together has been worth it. When the idea of motherhood had begun to fade in me, it forced me to ask questions of myself, forced me to choose between giving up and fighting on, between fear and faith, between doubt and belief. In the end, we persevered and found that time and love can heal. Even with my sweet baby by my side, my scars remain. It has taken me so long to accept who I've become through it all, but I have done that. I am comfortable with my scars now. They don't frighten me anymore because they are not all I see. So there we go. So I'm going to pause there and
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm getting all weepy now.
Cry up while I talk a little bit. So as someone who's gone through infertility, I can relate to many of the things that you went through, especially the loneliness. I remember with me, when you're trying to get pregnant, it seems like everybody around you is pregnant except for you. That's really hard to go through. I do remember that. So you wrote in your book, you had a line that you wrote, even if we can't see what's there, we have to go on faith. So faith is so important. And I think after everything we've gone through in the last couple of years with COVID and with such loss and with the climb of mental health and so many negative things happening in a situation like yours, what would you say to people? How do you dig down and find that faith when you think everything's stacked against you?
Oh, it's so personal. It's so personal. I think the first thing you have to do is to allow yourself the time to grieve, that nobody should tell you how long you have to get to pass over something, to process something. There's no timeline on grief. And I think that that's really important and really personal. And I think that as you dig into, the tough parts of life, you dig into yourself. And I think that line from that young woman, like the depth of our grief comes from the same place as the source of our love. So the strength is there. We just don't always have the opportunity to go down and get it. But I think it's important that every single one of us know that it is there, whatever your challenge is, whether it's an illness, whether it's losing your, a mother young, or whatever your challenge is, it's there. And I think it's important we all know that, because you just have to go and get it. And I just saw one of the comments, can we see a photo of your little boy? So I'm just gonna try to put it there. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
Can you guys see that there?
I can see that. I'm sure everyone else
can. Everyone can see it. So yeah, so thank you for asking. That's our little Samuel. So
there was a question asked, what was the decision? Why did you make the decision to leave the news? I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, I left 3 years ago. I was there for just over 18 years. I left because the news business was changing a lot. I'm sure a lot of you remember when they cut the sports department in one fell swoop, and Randy Tiemann and Brian Wilde were gone. And then not long after that, they cut our research department. And there's local news is changing a lot. And it's unfortunate, because local news is really, really important. But I was working very difficult hours. News happens at night. And I would start at 2 p.m. and finish at 12:30 in the morning. And after I had, struggled so much to become a mother, when Sam went from daycare into grade 1, so anybody who has children remembers what that transition is like. You go from, being able to pull him out and find out what's going on in his day, to like a super strict schedule of grade school. And I realized when he turned into grade 1 that I didn't want to miss out on any dinners and bedtime and family time. So I just felt that it was time to go. And I felt like I was the right age to sort of embark on a new journey in life. And I had been doing journalism for 24 years by that time. So it just felt like it was the right moment for me to move on and do something else. I had done it for a long time, and I felt like I had given all that I could to that particular job.
Good. And I agree. I think you only get one chance with your kids. With one child, or 3 at once is like having one anyway, because everything happens at the same time. So I agree with that. There is a question, being a child from South Korea, what are you doing to help him understand and appreciate his own heritage?
Oh, so much. We cook Korean food. We learn Korean words and sentences. We have a Korean flag in his room. We talk about the culture. We buy clothes. Like we recently just got him a traditional Korean uniform for birthdays. He's got his favorite soccer player is Son, which is the captain of the Korean soccer team. So it's just very much a part of our lives. We talk about his culture in the same way we talk about the adoption. This is a lot of people, and it's something that bothers me, that people often use the word adoption like it's something negative, less than. So we talk about it as if it's a fabulous, unique, wonderful journey. He knows all about his story, who he is, where he came from, what it means to be adopted. He whenever he asks questions, we answer them right away and honestly, very openly. So there's no negativity. He understands that there are many different ways to form a family, and this is one of them. And it's very healthy. I think he's going to grow up very healthy. The world around me scares me sometimes, but I know that he himself is very well grounded in who he is.
Have you been back, taken him to Korea at all?
We were supposed to go back, but COVID. But there's definitely we will 100% go back. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about it.
You talk in your book about a man named Peter that you met. Played a big role, and I love him, and I've never met him. Like,
oh my God,
wise words that he had.
Yeah.
Did you ever end up meeting him?
So Peter, just for some context, is one of the stories I mentioned that I wove in stories from CTV. So I covered the story of Peter's son who died. He was a volunteer firefighter who passed away in a training accident. And I was there covering the coroner's report a year after the death. And I met him in that moment. And then we parted. And 3 years later, he wrote me an email when I was going through my own grief, saying that he, we had this connection, and he felt like he wanted to write to me and say thank you for that moment. And I was like, oh my goodness, I was struggling at that time. So I kind of wrote him back and shared a little glimpse of my own loss. And then we became pen pals. And he's so wise. So he's kind of woven, his little nuggets of gold are woven throughout the book. And we are still pen pals to this day. And we have never met in person again since that very first time when I met him by the shores where his son had passed away. But we were emailing just last week. So yeah, he's a wonderful character in the book. And it's interesting, just one last thought on that. One of the people who reviewed my book thought it was interesting that there were very few characters in the book, which is true. There's, myself and my husband, there's Peter, there's like some, secondary characters that are woven in, but she said that she felt that it was interesting because it is a lonely journey. And in my book, there's very few characters. So you see that it is kind of a lonely journey that a couple goes through together. So kind of an interesting note there.
Yeah, but you have a lot of amazing experience in Thailand. When you said you in Asia, you actually stayed in Phuket, I believe, correct?
I stayed in Thailand because they basically, when you go through the adoption process, the judge pronounces you his legal parents, and then the adoption agency says, bye, go home and come back in like 6 weeks, and hopefully we'll have the paperwork then. So most parents leave and they go back to their country and they wait for that, them to be told to come back. But I didn't want to go, as I mentioned. So I just decided to hop on a plane down to Thailand for those 6 weeks. And I stayed there. And I was a really quick plane ride away from South Korea, from Seoul. So I got back, a month later, and that's when I took custody of Sam. They allowed me to take custody of him because I was the only parent that had come back at that time.
Did you ever think it would just not happen after everything you'd gone through, even though you were there?
Yep. Yeah, I really did. I was absolutely, because we'd had the experience of losing that first adoption, we were in a very different headspace than a couple who was adopting who would think, oh, well, nothing could go wrong. We knew that something could go wrong. We had lived it. So the birth mother can reclaim the baby right up until the moment you leave Korea. So right up until the moment, like we were in the airport and she was looking, the agent is looking through the papers, and I'm like sweating and like my heart is beating, and I'm just like, and I'm watching, she's looking up and she's not asking me any questions. And then finally it's like stamp, 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 you can go. And so we got through security, we got on the plane, and I pulled this thing out. I was like, just please, like, just take off. I just wanted the plane. And so finally the plane takes off, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's over, like it's over now. So I was absolutely terrified something would go wrong.
Wow. You also talk about acceptance of all parts, including the struggle. And I think that's so true and so profound that I think it holds a lot of people back if you don't accept like all parts, including the bad and the struggle that we go through. And I think perhaps was that a way that helped you work through all that you were going through?
I think so. And I think about it now, like sometimes someone will say to me, have you moved on, or have you, and I say, I don't think I will ever move on. And I don't want to, like, I want to remember all of the stuff that has made me who I am today. Like, I don't want to forget all the little babies that I buried, and all the lives that I had to say goodbye to. It's a part of me. And I don't want to feel like that part is bad. Like, that part is still me, and I cherish it. So I think that, we're all made up of the joys that we live and the sorrows that we survive. And I think it's all part of us. And I think is it the Dalai Lama who says, like, we will not get through life without suffering? Like, you just right away, you have to accept that part of life is suffering. It's just how you cope with it, what you do with it. My hurts are like tucked behind a shoulder blade somewhere. They don't hurt me anymore, but they're there. They're part of me. Look, I can't even read my books, some parts of my book, without crying. So they're there, and I cherish them.
It's who you are. It makes you stronger too, right? I mean, the loss, everyone has a loss. You have to have loss in some way, shape, or form. I know for years I never did, and then, man, it came with a vengeance. And when you dig deep, it's there. You're absolutely right. When you think you don't have it, it's absolutely there. Somebody had written, I'm just going to read what Edna Janko wrote to you, because she said, I completely understand. She lost her first pregnancy at the 5th month.
Oh, same as me, Edna.
Very lonely space, and now a wonderful life. I'm more thrilled for this important story that you share, and the way you look. We miss you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. No, but I have a really wonderful new life now, and I'm still in touch with lots of people there, and they're doing wonderful work. But it was time for me to move on. But I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much.
If it wasn't for this story journey that you went through, do you think you would have written something anyway? Is writing, I mean, you're a journalist, so writing's got to be in your veins, right?
Yeah, it's funny because when you're a television journalist, you don't tend to write things that are longer than 2-3 minutes. We write to visuals, we don't write. So when I started writing what was to become, I didn't even know if I could write a book. Like, I didn't know what it would take. So it was a learning curve for me too, to sort of like, okay, how do you shape a book? And then when I got the raw manuscript out, I contacted a Quebec publisher, Linda Leith Publishing. She publishes lots of wonderful books in Quebec. And I submitted the manuscript, and then they said, okay, we're going to work with you now. And that's where like the real work begins, like when the editors, I don't know if anyone out there likes to read the acknowledgements in a book. I love reading the acknowledgements. So there's a reason that every single writer thanks their editors first, because they are instrumental in helping you. They don't write the book for you, but they help you shape it. They're like, this doesn't work, redo this, write this. So like, it is, they're really making you work for it. So it was a year that I worked with them, and it was like a part-time job. It was a lot of, but I loved it. And so, it's the reason that the book has come into light, because I had a wonderful editor.
A little side note, I know you start your book saying you met your husband Friday the 13th, but I did too. I met mine Friday.
Did you?
Yes.
That's so funny.
Great day. So I never ever say Friday the 13th.
Oh no. It's a bad day. That's it. Right?
And I also had a dog called Milo. I know you have a cat.
I have a cat. He's like right over there having a little snooze. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything you miss about the news or being in that environment?
I think I really loved being the person that was helping people to see what was going on in the world, because the average person just doesn't have access to the kind of news that's going on in the world. And that's the responsibility of these news organizations. And I really took it very seriously. And I really felt privileged to be able to try to, help make sense of the chaos that was going on in the world. And I loved interviewing people. I loved sharing information. I loved helping people who were interviewees help share their story. I loved telling the stories of all of the wonderful people that I met over the course of those long years. So I did love that. I really did. But in a lot of ways, I guess I felt like I did it. And I felt like it was time to leave. But I really, really enjoyed it, but I don't miss it. But I really enjoyed it.
That's good. There's a question, would it have been too difficult for you to go through a second adoption process?
I think if I maybe had been younger, I might have considered it. But by the time like all was said and done, I was in my early 40s. And, again, like just a second adoption would have meant years of the process, going back to Korea, going through that all again. So it's not just, again, it's not like, oh, here's a second adoption, here's your baby. Like it would have been, a lot of work. So I think maybe if I had started the process younger, maybe, but at that time we didn't consider it. I also get asked a lot why I didn't adopt in Quebec, which I think is interesting because, I mean, first of all, there's not a ton of children to adopt in Canada in general because we have safe and and available abortion, and countries that people tend to adopt from don't. That's part of the reason there are so many babies in countries that are available, but also Quebec, because, we have to be different. Quebec actually you can't adopt a child. You have to do what's called foster to adopt. So you can foster for 2 years and then adopt. So the birth mother has up until 2 years to take back the baby. And I thought, well, I'd been through so much already that I thought, oh my God, it's going to be like 1 year, 11 months, 3 weeks and 5 days. And we would be like so close. And then all of a sudden, like, I couldn't process the possibility that we would lose a child after 2 years. So that's the reason we decided to go for a closed adoption internationally.
I hear you there. And I would imagine going through another adoption process would also have brought back a lot of very hurtful memories, even though, not the uncertainty of it all as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we were just happy, like finally, we had our family, we were finally happy. So we just decided to just live in that space for a little while.
A good space to live in.
It's a good space to live in.
See yourself in 5 years from now?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to see myself in like 5 weeks from now. But
it's so uncertain. But
that's it.
Any plans to do maybe more writing, or I don't know.
Maybe I think there's a possibility. I really did enjoy the process. I guess I would have to think about what I would want to write about. Some people have said, oh, are you going to write about what it's like to, because the book ends for me at what was an ending. But for many people are like, but what happened after that? So maybe, I don't know, but I definitely enjoyed the process. So I'll have to see.
So I wrote a children's book, but on triplets, but I think you should write a children's book on adoption.
Oh, maybe. Okay. I'll add that to my list of potential things that I will write. But you're right. Maybe that would be a nice thing too. What is the name of your book of children's book on triplets?
Fun.
It's called what?
3 times the fun.
3 times the fun. Nice. I'll go look for it.
I can send you the link. Does anyone else have any more questions?
Yeah, normally there's so many questions. What's going on? Somebody must have one.
No one has a question. Come on, people. You've got Tarah Schwartz here.
I'll answer anything. I'm an open book.
Motherhood, what you expected?
Oh, good one. Yes, it is. I love everything about it. I really do. I love everything about it. I think even like, the tough parts, like I love it. I love all the tough parts. I love everything about it. And maybe it's because we fought so hard to get it. Maybe I think it is, but I don't know because I never experienced it any other way. But I just love it. I love it so much. And I also got an absolutely beautiful little boy. Like he's funny and he's charming and he's cuddly and he's just a great kid. So I think maybe the universe cut us some slack and said, we're going to give you a perfect little guy because you deserve it.
So this whole journey must have changed your perspective too on, like you said, you left the news to spend time with your child, right? What about your husband? Has it changed his perspective, or does he spend more time? Do you, as a family unit now, like my husband travels a lot, right? So when the kids were little, it was me with the kids, but after going through something like that, do you think your perspective on where your priorities are have changed?
I think you don't sweat the small stuff. You know, I think you just don't sweat the small stuff. I think he went through a very difficult process than I did. You know, he lost a lot of friends. I think men in particular don't know how to deal with grief, you know, and they tiptoe away, and because it makes them uncomfortable. So sadly, I think it's, you know, might be a bit tougher on men in that way. But we certainly don't sweat the small stuff anymore. And there's a couple of, how old was your son when you adopted him? So he was 15 months old when we adopted him. And yes, I've heard about the teenage years. I am a little frightened.
Well, it's not. I think girls are worse.
Maybe. Are yours girls? But like, what are your?
Boys and a girl.
Okay. So yeah, I've heard that. I have 3 nieces, and I think the boys are a little easier. So.
Did you ever go to religion to help you accept your difficulties?
I went to what was to me religion. So I went to what's faith to me. You know, I use the word God. I pray. So I went to where I felt I needed to go to get my own strength, like what I believe. You know, the power of the universe, the energy force. You know, I was definitely going there to look for strength when I felt I didn't have it.
So there's another question. How did you keep going every day, being in the public eye, dealing with so much loss? That must have been.
Yeah. It was hard. But I would go to work and I would put on my makeup. And for me, that was the door. Like I would get my makeup on, and I was switching out of Tarah, you know, my own life, and switching into the news anchor who had a, you know, serious responsibility to do an important job that was going to, you know, communicate important information to people across the city and province. So as soon as I made that switch with the makeup on, I was, you know, laser beam focused on what I had to do, and got the job done. And you know, my dad would sometimes call me after I got the newscast, and he'd be like, "Oh, sweetheart, and I'm so glad you're feeling better." And I would be like, "Thanks, Dad." You know, so for him, like, it, you know, he saw me doing the news, and he's like, "Okay, she's feeling better," because you know, there was just 2 different people. Like I was laser focused.
It's probably a good thing that you had your job to go to distract you from.
Yes. A newsroom is very, very busy. So yeah. I did try acupuncture. I feel like I tried everything. I tried acupuncture. I tried all kinds of things like that. But like I said, I could get pregnant. I just couldn't stay pregnant. So, but I did try acupuncture. Yeah.
And I think they have one more question. Oh, I don't know if you want to answer this. What religion is the home?
What does it? I'm not exactly sure what you mean.
Either am I. Anyway,
if you want to clarify, but I'm not quite sure. So
fine, that's fine. Well, I think that's it. I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you so much, because I know it's such an important subject to talk about, like so many things out there that are just hushed and how to act around. You don't know what to say, and it isn't a negative thing. It's a struggle people go through, and I like I said, I can relate on so many levels. Reading your book, there were some things I was like,
yeah, I think more women go through it than people realize, and I think the reason that people don't realize is because we don't talk about it. So I think that that should change. You know, it's really important, and the only way to forge like a more compassionate path forward for the women who are going through it is to talk about it, because there are a lot of women who are going through it.
You only realize once you start talking about it.
That's it. And I think it'll make us feel less alone. I think that our emotions will be validated. I think we can seek support in each other. I think all of those reasons. So if anybody has, you know, anyone in their life that they think would benefit from seeing themselves reflected, you know, it would be wonderful to tell them about the book. Like I said, it's available pretty much everywhere, Amazon bookstores. So
extra copy, Can't Help Falling by Tarah Schwartz. Thank you, Tarah, for helping us close out the Sisterhood event. Thank you for telling us your story. We so appreciate your time, and good luck with the book. I'm sure it's going to be a great seller.
Thank you.
Have a great summer. And everyone, we will see you next year, Jewish New Year. So September, when we come back again. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.